Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to firstly set up our project. So I've sat down and I've created my project, and I've created my folder structure of how I'm going to classify the areas in which I want to do my clashing and checking on. So in my area called TS101, which could be a transfer station, for example, I'm going to have the model for the structural steel, maybe a head shoot, maybe another subfolder for a different model. Obviously, every model that I do, I want to capture the information per model to make it easy to view that information or clash that information, right? So the other thing that I'm going to do in the project admin space is I'm going to set up a clash space for each area that I'm working in. Because I'm working with multiple models in one area, I want to go and check those models against each other. So in the model coordination space here on the left, you will see that I have two clash zones set up. I've got one called TS101, one called TS102, and you can see the two folders that they are working in. Obviously, with Transfer Station 101, I don't want to clash it with Transfer Station 102 because they're going to be in totally different locations. But I set up this clash space and the folder structure to suit inside my document management, inside of BIM360 docs, getting ready to do my first clash or first model check, right? So the model check is going to consist of two parts. It's going to consist of the clash detection. So whether or not all these models that I've got in here actually sit together nicely without any physical clashes. And secondly, I need to review each one of the models one by one to make sure it matches the design drawings, and if there's any issues, well, we essentially create those issues inside of BIM360 docs. Right, before we can start with our model checking or design review of our model, we need to create the issue types and subtypes that we want to classify all the problems or issues that we find in the model. So for example, I've created a modeling issue type and then a series of subtypes underneath. Now, because I'm relating this back to steel, you can see maybe I've got geometry problems, clearance space issues, general modeling issues, maybe I've got plate thickness problems, profile size problems. I mean, you can go to whatever granular level you like in this particular space. You can also see we've got status for field. So if I click in here, you can see the field status. That's the extended workflow for the process for which each issue will be resolved and captured in. So from a custom attribute perspective, we need to create a series of attributes and add these attributes to our issue type to be able to capture them. So for example, is from TQRFI was one of the options that I wanted to have. And so I'm going to choose a drop-down option, and I'm going to have one of these issues as RFI, add TQ, sorry, do that again, RFI, pick OK, TQ, pick OK, and I'm going to also have an option for no. And these are the drop-down values of that particular issue type, right? You can see they're set at drop-down. Oh, goodness me. So we can do it again, TQ, add new one, RFI, new one, no, and tick, and create. Right? So what we've now got is we've created one attribute. So now we're going to create another attribute. So if we choose that it was a TQ and RFI, I want to capture that number, right? So what is the TQ/RFI number, right? Only use if TQ or RFI was selected in the previous drop down. Right, put space down here. Right, again we create that, Okay, again, I'm going to create another one. Let's say is design change notice is from design change notice. Right, again, I'm going to choose a drop down. Say yes, no, just tick. Again, hit create. So we're going to create another one. Again, we want to know what the design change notice number, and we'll leave it as a text value because this could be, in my case, I could have a text value. We may also want to capture, for example, the design change notice description. And then for this, I'm going to leave it as a paragraph so that I can describe a paragraph of what's here. Again, put the colon in, yes. And for the last one, I'm going to put the potential variation hours that I might want to capture. And again, this is just an example, just showing you that I can use one of each of the values here. Enter hours spent to fix issue. All right. So this is just in case you want to capture that information, right? And then hit create. Now, so I've created all my particular custom attributes here. You can also see I can edit and delete them on the back end, no problems. We come back into our issue types and we go to our modeling, and we can choose edit here, or we can just click here, and we can choose to add all these particular options in as part of our issue. And then we can specify if they are required fields. So, you know, this is probably going to be required. This will be required, but the values for the description of the design change notice, or what the TQ number is, not valid, because if we pick no, then we can't put a value in. You may choose to put a required yes or no option for the potential variation, but in my case, I'm going to hit no. Right? When I hit save, now all those custom attributes will be part of every issue that I create that is of the modeling type, irrespective if I use geometry as a subtype, model clearance, whatever, any of these particular subtypes. All those properties or attributes will be in the form for me to fill in. Right, so I'm about to start my first check. Obviously, I want to check for clashes before I want to check for design issues in my model. If you've got clashes, you've probably got a problem with your design anyway. So it makes sense to do that first, or at least from my perspective. So you can see in this case, under my clash checking area for TS101, I go into TS101 and I've got all my models uploaded into this space. Important to note that I deleted all the 2D layouts because they weren't really necessary, so to speak. So from where I'm sitting, I just want to upload my models and off I go. Now, if I now switch to my clash detection space, you can see I choose on model coordination from the ellipsis in the top left-hand corner, and it comes in and loads the file. Now, depending on where the last place you were in model coordination, it will load into a particular space that you can choose from the top right-hand corner. So in this particular case, the current clash space that I'm looking at, if you remember, we have two clash spaces defined inside of this environment. The first one is TS102. We're actually referring to TS101. So I click TS101, and the system now brings in for me the space for me to view. All right. So essentially what we've got is we've got two different tabs up here, and we get a few more as time goes along. The initial space allows me to load any combination of those particular models that were in my folder, right? So for example, This particular structural transfer station is made up of 4 different models. This is just an example. I may want to look at 0, 1 and 0, 2 together, but I may also want to look at number 1 and number 2 together, right? So I can choose any number of these, and when I hit the View button, the system will then load those 2 particular models into that particular space. Almost from an AutoCAD perspective, it's like an XREF, or from a Revit perspective, if you manage thinking about linking the files together using the links, you get those 2 elements together. Now I know, for example, model M1 is the primary steelwork, and M2 was the internal steelwork that you see down here, right? So from my perspective, I'm able to load the particular models that I want, view the models together from a viewing perspective. I can also see the clashes for these 2 particular models in this case as well, either by object, filtered by object. So you can see here, for example, I've got a beam clashing with a beam. If I pick on these 2 elements, it shows me where those 2 clashes are. If I tick the box next to the beam, you can see it highlights and gives me more of a definitive look, whereas here in the other space, I'm literally just going, oh yeah, there's that clash, there's that clash. So I can see there's lots of little clashes going on here, which are causing me a problem, right? And this is when I filter by object. If I filter by layer, it now takes the layer information and says, well, look, all the beams that were on this particular layer, or elements on that particular layer, are clashing with all these objects as well, right? So again, where's the clash here, then where's the clash there, and it zooms to me around the model to be able to see the clashes. And this is based on the fact that I'm doing a clash review by the number of models that we have in here. We can also come into the model space and add more models to it. So for example, I may want to bring in the concrete model. Hit select. The system will then go and load that 3rd model in. Now you can see my concrete model is in there. And again, we come into that clash space and we have a whole bunch more layers of where the clashes exist, because now we've got clashes with concrete as well as the beams on that 1st level. But this is just one way to view it, right? So if I close this and uncheck these boxes, we can also go into the clash space, right? So in the clash space, or in the clash tab, rather, in here we're able to see every model versus every other model to see how many clashes there are. So for example, between M0 and M1, so if I said between M1 and M0, there's 4 clashes that exist, right? So you can see here's M1, there's M0, and between those 2 particular models, there is 4 clash groups, right? So if I click on that item inside the matrix, the system will load those 2 particular models, and of course, again, highlight all the particular clashes. So in this case, the only clashes that exist between M1 and M0 exist here at the base where the bracing is clashing with the concrete, right? And of course, we can switch by object or by layer again as well. We can always bring in more models even in this environment as well, just like we did before. But the idea is once we find a clash, we need to fix that clash, right? So depending on who, what, when, where, we sit down and we choose the particular clashes that we want to do. We create an issue. We may pick a point. Let's say there, for example. It tells me the number of clashes that I've selected, and we give it a title. So we may say bracing on south side of model, clashing with concrete footings. Right, and then choose a person to assign the clashes to. Now in this case, I'm the only one on this project, so I'm going to assign the clashes to myself. But remembering we can assign this to another individual, and then we can specify who these clashes should be assigned to. So what time, how long we have to close these out by. So because I've got a short delay in delivery, in this particular case, I'm going to choose the second. I'll go next. I'm going to choose the second to have these closed out by. Hit create. And now that issue has been created as part of my clash. Now, of course, I would continue to do this till all my clashes are assigned, right? So I'd probably do another one now on the north side, which would then close those, or at least have those two clashes assigned, ready to go, right? Okay, so you've seen the clashes now change from 4 till 2 because we've actually assigned those clashes to somebody else to be fixed. In this particular case, I'm only assigning them to me, but for all intents and purposes, it paints a good picture. Now I can see these assigned clashes in the assigned tab, right? I can also see the closed issues that have been assigned, or clashes that have been closed and assigned, closed and fixed in the closed tab. So if I come into the assigned tab, you can see the particular issues themselves, and you can view these by clicking on the link on the end, which just brings up the clash itself, very much like what we did before, where we had the two items colored in red and green in that 3D view. Obviously, the system needs to load those particular models first, and you can see here, this is your first interaction with the actual issues tab itself. Now you can see in this particular case, all clashes created in model coordination tab are hard-coded to be a coordination clash, right? And this is important. The subtype, we can choose to change the different subtypes based on what we've defined in our model. So up to us, I mean, we can choose a clash or a coordination, whatever. For the moment, I'm just going to leave it clash in here as well. At this point, we can add attachments to this particular issue. So if I'm choosing to fix this issue and I know, for example, I fixed it, I can take a screenshot from my session of Advanced Heal, drag and drop that image into this environment, and choose to maybe even reply saying, hi, I think this clash is as designed, or something along those lines, right? And when you hit send, this is then added to the issue, and this is the same banter, or this is the email chain that would go backwards and forwards between the checker and the actual individual. Now, once I'm actually good to say this has been answered or closed out, I can choose to say it's answered. Choose to come in and say, model fix applied, refer revision. Right? Hit done, and now I've changed the status of that activity and said it has been answered. Right? So then I need to go and obviously choose to upload that new version of the file, which I will do, and just so you can see an example. Alright, so I've uploaded a new version. I've just fixed my file. You can see here is version 2 of the 3D view, which is the model space component. Obviously the 2D is the model space, but in a 2D environment, right? So you can see I've uploaded a new version of the file. Just to show you what's changed, you have a look in here. You can see I've created two connections at the base of the column to give me exactly what it is I need. And you can see my issue here as well. You can view the issue inside the document, even though the clash issue itself was inside the clash space as well. And this is because the issues are common to BIM360 docs, and it's just utilized by the model coordination tool to store it, right? So if we go to our model coordination space now and have a look, again, when it loads, we want to come in and go to our clashes tab. Okay, go to our assigned clashes, and because our draftsman, who was actually me, but in theory the draftsman has changed the status of the clash issue to be answered, I would have got a notification as the checker to tell me that the clash has been resolved, or whatever the answer was, right? So I would come in, I would click on my link, and obviously I would come in here and it's going to load that same environment. However, this time you'll notice that the green and the red colored items that were clashing before are now no longer clashing. So now from myself as the checker, I can choose the closed issue, or change the status to closed, and sit down and say fixed correctly, right? So we'll do that, hit done, and now that issue has been closed out, and you can see that color has changed. Important to note here is that this method of clashing the objects could be utilized by the checker, but it could also be utilized by the draftsman very, very much so, right? In that every day when I finish my work, I drag and drop my file into this folder, and then at any point in time I can come and review the clashes during the process of my design. Another way to view the issues here is to come into the Issues tab, in which, and we're going to come in here a lot more as time goes along, so that I can actually see all my issues. I've obviously only got one issue in this particular case, but you can find out that it's assigned to this particular file. There's this many number of attachments. There's 3 comments attached to this particular case, and if there was any other custom attributes that I want to see, which we'll cover a little bit later on, or maybe the root cause, or who the owner was, who was created by, and so on, you can add these items and they get added to the list of data that you see here in this environment, right? And this is very important because this gives you a real good view of all the issues that exist inside of your project, right? Now, the list can also be filtered, right? By type, by status, by location, who was assigned to, the due date, what the root cause was, who it was created by, when it was created on. So if you want to find all the issues that were created on a particular date of checking, because you know that some checking occurred that day, you can filter this. And remember, this has nothing to do with clash checking, but this is just general use of these issues. And you'll see this when we go to that model by model review process, which I'm going to show you next, right? This is very important. Whatever list you see here, when you choose to do a PDF export, will give you a list of all those issues with a PDF report. If I choose to do a CSV export, it will export me all the issues out in a comma delimited file, allowing me to then bring it into another location to potentially manipulate the data, maybe Power BI or Excel, or using pivot tables or something along those lines. Right, so what we want to do is we just want to do a simple old model review that's got nothing to do with clashes. So in theory, we've run the clash detection already, we've resolved all the clashes, or the draftsman has resolved all the clashes prior to putting the model in the space. I'm now the checker, and I've gone and checked to make sure that all that components are clear of clashes, right? So the idea is that we now need to check the model for whatever status it is meant to be according to the design drawings, right? So, I can sit down and open my view of my model. Obviously, this is version 2 of the file. We can always go and see the different versions of these files at any point in time. The idea is you would sit and, check stuff, you would click on things like, for example, the plate here. We could, come and look at the properties of these components. So, for example, in this case, the plate thickness is 20 mil. In this particular case, let's say that this is incorrect, and we actually want this to be 25 mil, right? So from a checking perspective, I can go to my issues panel, and I can create a brand new issue, pick a point, and then choose my issue type. So if you remember back, Last time we were using coordination issues. This time we're using modeling issues, right? So in this case, I want to capture that it's a modeling issue and I've got the wrong plate thickness. Plate should be 25 mm. Again, I'm assigning it to myself, but as a checker, you normally assign it to the drafty. Choose when he wants it to be finished by. There is location information if you need to put that in there. Not important for what we want to do. And if we know the reason it happened, if you remember, we also had our root causes from a modeling perspective. So it could be that it was a user error, it could be actually a design change, or incorrectly specified on the drawing, whatever it may be. So for example, I could say change plate to 25 mm, spell it right, and include a 50 snipe at the corner of the base plate to allow for welding, right? Then at the bottom of our issue, if you remember, we had all those custom attributes that are part of those modeling style issues, right? Is this related to a TQ? No, it's not. Is it a design change notice? No, it's not. So the rest of it can all be ignored because this field, this field, this field, and this field were not required or mandated fields. If you leave one, sorry, this one was a required field. If you leave one that should be required, so let's say that this is a yes, and the design change notice is DCN, something like that. When we hit create, there you go, and you can see the difference of when it's a required field or not a required field, right? So if you do need to take this issue and print it out for whatever reason, this can also be done as well, so we can export this as a PDF if we want to. And me as the creator can always come back and edit this as well. That's not an issue. I may choose to add some attachments to this particular case. So maybe I want to take a screenshot of what was on the design drawing, save it as a PDF and attach it to here, or as an image. You can see when I browse, I can browse either to files that are located on my local drive or files that already exist inside my BIM360 docs. So if, for example, the design drawings are inside of BIM360 docs, then obviously I can browse to those and reference the design drawing in here as an attachment for him to go and have a look at. In the activity log, I can also add extra notes. So if I want to make some comments or whatever for the drafty to take note of when doing the fix, I can add the comments in here, and of course the drafty can comment back if he disagrees with my synopsis of what the problem is. And he can also use the @ sign to mention other people on the project to get third-party referral to this problem if somebody else maybe has directed him to do so. All right. The idea is that you would create a whole range of these issues inside your environment or inside your 3D view, and you can see that I can spin around and I can do all sorts of different things. So for example, maybe we want to change the size of this brace here, for example, right? So let's go and move that around. Maybe the size of this brace is wrong, right? So again, we would create an issue. We would say create issue. We'd pick a point. It's not a plate thickness issue. It's a profile size problem. Angle too small in size. Again, who to assign it to, when it needs to be fixed by. What the root cause is, and again, this could just be a could be, doesn't necessarily have to be a modeling problem, could be a design problem, right? So we may know, for example, that the code compliance is incorrect here for the load brace. It could be anything. The root cause itself doesn't necessarily have to be a just a user error, right? It can be anything it likes. Again, we would sit down and choose here, the DCN. Well, again, we're just going to say yes. Again, give a description, potential hours, whatever you like. Hit create, and now the issue has also been created, right? So important here to note is it records who assigned the issue, who created the issue, and what version of the file it is, and whether the file is still current. So if I get a new version of the file, this will no longer say it's current. So if file has been fixed, you'll be able to tell because you'll be able to see this from this environment. Now, myself coming back as the draftsman, because those two issues were assigned and created to me, I will get an email notification, and as a user, I will either open directly from the email the link, or maybe I know I've got multiple issues that have been sent to me, so therefore I've got to fix multiple issues. I can either drive it from the issues tab itself. So for example, if I open up the plate thickness tab, I come in and I say, here's all the problems. I want to know where the problem exists. It's still the current file. I can see that. I click. It will load the view for me so that I can see where the problem is. I don't necessarily have to navigate to the actual file itself. Where in this case, actually, I know that that's correct. So I can close that. I can come back in here. Go back. Come back into here, and in the activity, say, but the design drawing on ABC M- says 20 mm. This is correct, right? And now the other guy is going to get a notification with information to say that I disagree with the answer, right? And the good part is, again, we can export this out as a PDF if we need to. These communications that exist inside here are captured inside of the issues interface for each issue, right? So if you have a look here, just reload that page for me, you'll see here the 25mm plate issue that I was referring to. I've got one single comment here because I've made a comment on that particular issue, right? And I may only want to see the open issues, for example, right? Which then filters the dialog box accordingly. And all the filters that you place sit up here, right? So I may have gone and discussed this with the actual draft, with the checker, and he's happy for me to close out the issue, right? So I can sit and come in, and because we defined our issue type as having a more complex or a field set of statuses, we can sit down and say that it's ready to inspect. It's actually correct. So we can say plate is as designed and doesn't need to be fixed. Right. And then again, the information goes back to that individual. He gets a notification telling him that the status on his issue has been changed. Now I come in as the checker, obviously, and I want to go and review what he said. I can again see all the information about what's happened. If you go to the activity, you can see that this was changed to to the next status, ready to inspect. I can now go say closed, and and I don't necessarily need to put a comment in, just hit done, and now that again the issue is closed. If we turn off that filtering, you can see we've got 2 closed issues. Now if we go back to the document module itself, you'll see that when we go to the actual file where we were working in, there's a few things that you can actually see at the document module or document management module level, which is quite important. So if you come into here, firstly you can see over here there is still one outstanding issue on this file. So you can see visually from just looking at the files how many issues are attached to each individual file, right? And when you come into here, if you just let it load up, you can see as it comes up, if I bring up the issues, there we go. So you can see when I click on that, it takes me straight to that issue, or if I close that, you can see that issue's there, and we can actually see and we can turn these issues on and off visually depending on what you want to see in the model. So it's quite easy to manage and manipulate. But what if I needed to create an issue with an attachment, right? And at the moment, you know, let's say for example I've got a stiffener missing here, right? So what I want to do is I want to create a markup first of all, right? So I zoom into where I want to be here. So let's say here, and I want to create a bit of a markup to say, hey, I need a stiffener here, right? And I'll put some text in. Missing stiffener, right? And for all intents and purposes, I want to save this markup, right? It's important that you save the markup because the markup itself is a recorded history of what I'm doing. And I want to make it public because in reality, I want everyone to be able to see my markup, which again is saved back and recorded against who did it, the time, the version of the file, and whether it's still current. Now, I want to actually save this markup as an attachment to an issue, right? So I would sit down and I've got this third-party app that I've installed here, which saves for me an image, and I just want to remember that path, save. Now what it's done is it's saved away an image for me. I might exit the markup view, come in and create a new issue here, and it's going to be missing stiffener, spell it correctly, there we go. Again, it's going to be assigned to me, close out by Wednesday, root cause, and this time, you know, it may well be a design change variation, so it's not a TQ, but it's going to be a design change, DCN number, stiffener is required because of load, and this is going to be a 2-hour variation, right? Now pick OK, and the beauty here is obviously it creates the issue. If I bring up the issue under the attachments, I'm going to choose to browse and upload the file from my local drive. So because I saved the path before, here we go, grab that image, and now that image that I captured before is being uploaded and stored inside of my issue, something that's not possible with today's technology, but who knows in the future, right? And again, from the activity perspective, everything is captured inside of here, giving me that ability to be able to see all the information about my issue. So you can see quite easily, quite quickly, we can store information and capture it and add it to an issue. Now, obviously, this markup is live along with the issue. Now, at some point in time, that issue needs to be closed out, right? And we want to make sure that the markup is also closed out with it, right? So ideally, in the markup area, I would come and archive my markup just before I'm ready to archive my issue. So I would come into here and missing stiffener, and you know, I'm the checker, closed, stiffener was added. Of course, in this case, the stiffener wasn't added, but I would come into a third variation of this file and there would be a stiffener added. and then I hit done, and again that issue is closed. The beauty here is the issue and everything related to it is stored in the cloud, including the markup. Even though it's archived, it's always retrievable any point in time just by clicking show me the markup itself, and then from then on in you can actually get everything else that it is you need. All right.